Let's start with the introduction of GraphQL. GraphQL is open source query language. GraphQL is created by Facebook in 2012 and open source in 2015. Now you would be having questions about GraphQL, like what is GraphQL, why we use it, what it does, what are its use cases, what was before GraphQL. It means what we were using before the GraphQL came in. What are the advantages of using GraphQL? What are the disadvantages of using GraphQL? Now the first definition for the GraphQL is a query language for API. So GraphQL is a data query and manipulation language for APIs. So we use it as a query language for querying API. Well, we will break it down in details with a smart example as we go on further. So GraphQL came to solve the issues which were there with the REST. It is not a replacement of REST, however, it brings some advantages and provides very feasible ways to query and manipulate data, which were not possible in the REST. Let's decode the official website of GraphQL and see what it does. So majorly the benefits or the use cases they have provided are categorized into four categories. The first one is querying the exact data. So with the GraphQL, we have the ability to query the exact data we want from the server, unlike REST, where whole data comes in response and we filter it out on the UI side and show what is needed to be displayed to the end user. That is an overhead if the response is huge and we wanted only a single key. For example, from the context schema, we want to get only the first name of all employees but not the other details like email, birthday, phone number. You may think it is possible with the rest as well, but we need a separate API for that. Right now, however, with GraphQL, we use a single endpoint responsible for accepting different queries. We do not need dedicated API for each custom data query request. Isn't it amazing? Let's see an example I created to make it easy to understand. So GraphQL also provide a tool named GraphQL and it looks like this, where in the left side you can write your queries and mutations and at the right side you can see the results. So let's start with the schema which I have already created. We will be setting up this GraphQL tool from scratch once we will start developing our backend. The name of the schema which I created is contacts. So let's see what it does. So what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to find out the information which is already there in the database, and these are the values in the schema. So when we press this execute query button, we will be getting the data from our database, and you can see it is coming in the form of JSON. So we have the data and then we have the context and with all the four keys here. The point to be noticed here is that in the context schema, we have all the four keys. What if I only want to get the name of that contact? So I can change my query and execute the same button. Now you can see I'm just getting only the names and not other details. So this is the way of getting the exact data we query in the database. Now let's talk about another key I want to get it, suppose email. And if I will execute the same query, I will get only two information. And we are just using a single API, which is the slash GraphQL. We don't need any separate endpoint for this. Now take an example of fetching the specific contact information. So now we can see that we have the ID field in our response. So I'm just copying this response and only want the data for this specific contact. So I need to pass this as an argument in this, and after that if I will hit my query, I should be getting the data exactly for this contact. Let's see how. So if I will hit the query, now you can see I pass the ID as an argument and I'm getting the data for this specific contact. Now we are going to the another point which was there, like get many resources in a single request. So what it does, it means is that GraphQL gives the ability to query other resources in a single request. For example, we can query two schema in a single query and get the combined response. For example, we can query contact schema fields along with the country schema field, like contact first name, contact last name from the context schema, and context country name from the another schema, which is country. both in a single query, and we do not need any separate API for that. Let's understand it by taking an example. Right now, I do have two schemas. One is the contacts. Let's check what it has. It has all the names because I queried for the name. Now let's check for the another schema, which is countries. Similarly, it has all the keys. I'm just querying the name. We can see we have the name of all the countries as well. Now what I want is that I want all the contacts, their name, their phone number, and their associated countries. So let's see how we can do it, because they are both different schemas. So doing this in GraphQL is relatively easy. Let's see. I need the phone number of the contacts, then I need the country of that particular contact and out the name of that country. So let's see how it comes. If I will query it, it will respond me the contacts, their name, their phone number, and the country name. So we can see here we have the contacts, their both keys, and the country schema, which has its names. Isn't it amazing that we can query two schemas in a single query and we can get the data as well? This is really easy to render this content on the UI without doing so much filtering. Let's check the next feature, and it is evolve your API without versions. What it does mean? It means that no need to create new versions of API every time you change their types or add new fields. No impact on existing queries either. Older and aging fields can be easily deprecated and newer can be added. GraphQL gives apps continuous access to the new features and more maintainable server code. It's so clever. Let's see the last feature mentioned in their website of GraphQL. So GraphQL bring your own data and code. What it means? It means that GraphQL is not limited to any language or database. So without affecting your existing code base and data, you can start implementing the GraphQL query engine. So now we know how awesome GraphQL is. We have already seen who is using GraphQL in the introduction of our course. Now let's discuss about disadvantage of GraphQL. The GraphQL returns 200 HTTP status code for all its queries, regardless of whether or not that query was successful. Although, if the query was unsuccessful, JSON will have the error key with the error message. Sometimes it becomes hard to perform error handling in that case. Another disadvantage of GraphQL is the local caching, unlike REST, where we have multiple endpoints and they can leverage native HTTP caching to avoid prefetching resources. However, we have Apollo cache to help us here. We have Apollo in our list in the course. You will love the performance and benefits of GraphQL. Let's head to the development. We will start developing our backend first, then we will jump on creating the front end side of our project. See you in the next chapter.